This story is not about controlling other people. It is about controlling yourself. If you always react immediately to anger, to insults, to pressure, to fear, to criticism, to pain, then life controls you. But if you learn not to react, you gain something rare and powerful: emotional control, mental clarity, inner strength, respect from others, confidence without noise, power without aggression. This story will teach you why the strongest people are often the quietest ones, why silence can be louder than words, why reacting less gives you more control over life, people, and yourself. You will learn why reactions make you weak, how emotional control builds dominance, how not reacting changes relationships, how calm becomes power, how silence protects your future. This is not motivation. This is mental evolution. If you master this lesson, your life will never feel chaotic again. Most people ruin their lives in seconds. One angry reply, one emotional reaction, one unnecessary argument, one moment they couldn't stay calm, and they don't even realize it. They think reacting is strength. They think speaking back is confidence. They think proving themselves is power. But the truth is brutal. The more you react, the more control you lose. Look closely at people who struggle. They react to every insult. They argue with everyone. They explain themselves too much. They get emotional too fast. They let words control their mood. Now look at people who are respected. They pause. They observe. They stay calm. They speak less. They choose silence over noise. This story will show you why not reacting is one of the most dangerous skills a human can learn. Because once you stop reacting, people can no longer manipulate you. Situations can no longer control you. Emotions can no longer destroy you. And when that happens, you don't just feel stronger. You become stronger. Paragraph 1. The first time he realized reacting was costing him everything. His name was Noah, and for most of his life he believed reacting quickly meant being strong. If someone disrespected him, he spoke back immediately. If someone criticized him, he defended himself instantly. If something went wrong, he reacted emotionally without thinking. He thought this was confidence. He thought this was self-respect. But slowly, silently, without warning, his life began to fall apart. Not because he was weak, but because he was always reacting. Every reaction drained his energy. Every argument stole his peace. Every emotional response pushed him further away from the calm, powerful version of himself he secretly admired in others. Noah didn't notice it at first. People rarely do. Reacting feels natural, feels justified, feels human. But what he didn't understand was that every reaction was giving his power away. One night changed everything. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no fight, just a quiet moment that exposed a painful truth. Noah had been working hard on something important, a project that meant more to him than he admitted. When someone dismissed it casually, almost carelessly, he felt heat rise in his chest. His heart beat faster. His mind raced. Without thinking, he reacted. He explained. He defended. He raised his voice slightly. He tried to prove his value. And in that moment, he saw something in the other person's eyes. Not fear, not respect, but control. The other person was calm, almost amused. Noah was emotional, exposed, predictable, and suddenly it hit him. The calmer person always has the power. That realization stayed with him like a weight. Later that night, alone in his room, Noah replayed the moment again and again. He didn't feel angry anymore. He felt embarrassed, not because of what was said, but because he realized how easy it was for others to control his emotions. One comment and he reacted. One look, and he changed his tone. One word and his mood collapsed. That wasn't strength. That was weakness disguised as confidence. And for the first time in his life, he asked himself a dangerous question. What if my reactions are the reason people don't take me seriously? From that moment, Noah started observing instead of reacting. He watched conversations closely. He noticed patterns. The loudest person was rarely the strongest. The angriest person was rarely respected. The one who reacted first usually lost control of the situation. Meanwhile, the person who paused, who stayed quiet, who responded slowly, or not at all, seemed untouchable. People leaned toward them, listened to them, respected them, and Noah realized something that shook him deeply. Silence was not weakness, it was discipline. But learning not to react was harder than he imagined. His emotions were fast. His habits were deep. Every insult triggered him. Every challenge tempted him to respond. It felt uncomfortable, almost painful to stay silent. His mind screamed, say something. Defend yourself. React now. But he began resisting. Not perfectly, not every time, but enough to feel the difference. And that difference was powerful. When he didn't react, the situation lost energy. Arguments died before starting. People revealed their intentions without him saying a word. And most importantly, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: control. Noah began to understand that not reacting didn't mean accepting disrespect. It meant choosing when and how to respond. It meant not letting emotions decide his actions. It meant mastering the pause between stimulus and response, the space where true power lives. Every time he stayed calm, his confidence grew quietly. Not loud, not aggressive, but solid, unshakable. People noticed. Conversations changed. The world responded differently to him. Not because he became louder, but because he became still. That was the beginning, not of silence, but of strength. Paragraph 2. Why silence makes people uncomfortable plus emotional control as dominance. Silence is one of the most misunderstood powers in human interaction, and most people fear it without ever knowing why. When Elias first began practicing the power of not reacting, he noticed something strange almost immediately. Not inside himself, but inside other people. The moment he stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped filling the air with words, the room felt heavier. Conversations slowed. People shifted in their seats. Some laughed nervously. Some spoke too much. Some grew irritated. Silence made them uncomfortable, and Elias realized it wasn't because silence was weak, but because silence removed the control they were used to having. Most people rely on reactions to feel safe. They rely on your words to measure their importance, your emotions to validate their power, your explanations to confirm that they matter. When you remove your reaction, you remove their feedback loop. Their mind starts searching for meaning, for confirmation, for dominance. And when it doesn't find it, discomfort appears. Silence exposes insecurity the same way darkness reveals fear. It forces people to confront themselves. Elias remembered how, in the past, he always rushed to respond. When someone criticized him, he explained. When someone misunderstood him, he clarified. When someone provoked him, he reacted emotionally. He believed reacting meant strength. But now he saw the truth. Reacting was submission. Every emotional response handed control to the other person. They decided his mood. They decided his energy. They decided the direction of the interaction. Silence, on the other hand, took that control back. When Elias stayed calm and quiet, he noticed people started talking more. Not because they had more to say, but because their nervous system couldn't tolerate the lack of reaction. Humans are wired to seek emotional mirrors. When they don't get one, anxiety rises. This is why silence feels uncomfortable. It removes predictability. It removes reassurance. It removes the illusion of control. Emotional control is dominance not because it intimidates, but because it stabilizes. The calmest person in the room sets the emotional temperature. Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't need to win. He simply stayed grounded. And something powerful happened. People adjusted to him. Conversations slowed down. Aggressive tones softened. Provocations lost strength. Silence became a boundary no one could cross without exposing themselves. Those who wanted to control him failed. Those who wanted validation felt uneasy. Those who wanted a reaction were starved of fuel. Emotional dominance wasn't loud. It was quiet. It wasn't forceful. It was unshakable. Elias began to understand that most conflicts don't escalate because of facts. They escalate because of reactions. One raised voice invites another. One insult demands a defense. One emotional spike creates a chain reaction. But silence breaks the chain. When Elias refused to react, there was nothing to fight against. No resistance, no friction, just space. And in that space, the other person had to face their own behavior. Silence became a mirror. It reflected impatience, insecurity, ego, and fear back to the person projecting it. This was why silence felt threatening to people. It removed distraction, forced awareness. He noticed this especially in moments of provocation. When someone tried to embarrass him, the old Elias would have rushed to prove himself. The new Elias paused. He breathed. He stayed still. The moment stretched. The person smiled awkwardly. Someone else changed the topic. The power shifted without a single word spoken. Elias felt something new rise inside him. Not pride, not arrogance, but control. Not control over others, but control over himself. And that control was intoxicating in the most disciplined way. It made him feel untouchable. Silence also revealed who respected him and who only respected reactions. Some people grew calmer around him. They listened more. They chose words carefully. Others became restless, even hostile. These were the people who needed emotional responses to feel powerful. Elias learned an important lesson. People who are uncomfortable with your silence are uncomfortable with their lack of control over you. Silence does not weaken relationships, it filters them. It separates those who value presence from those who crave dominance. The deeper Elias went into this practice, the more he understood that emotional control is a form of leadership. Leaders don't react to every stimulus. They observe. They assess. They respond only when necessary. Reactivity is a sign of emotional debt. You owe something to every comment, every opinion, every provocation. Silence clears that debt. It says, I do not owe you my energy. And energy, Elias realized, is the most valuable currency a human possesses. Once you protect it, your entire life changes. Silence also slowed time. When Elias stopped reacting instantly, moments stretched longer. He noticed more details. He chose better responses or no response at all. His words became fewer but heavier. When he did speak, people listened, because his silence had given his voice weight. This was another truth few people understand. Constant talking devalues words. Silence increases their value. When someone knows you don't speak unless it matters, every sentence carries authority. Elias no longer feared being misunderstood. He no longer rushed to correct perceptions. He understood something deeply freeing. You do not need to manage how others see you. The more you try, the weaker you appear. Silence lets people project their assumptions, and those assumptions reveal more about them than about you. Emotional control meant freedom from other people's opinions, and that freedom created an unshakable inner calm. By the end of this phase, Elias understood that silence was not emptiness. It was space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to choose. And in that space, he found power. Not the loud, aggressive power of domination, but the quiet, undeniable power of self-mastery. The power that doesn't need permission. The power that doesn't seek validation. The power that remains steady while others lose balance. This was when Elias truly understood. The strongest reaction is no reaction at all. Paragraph 3, when you stop reacting, you start seeing clearly. When he stopped reacting, something unexpected happened inside him. His world slowed down. Not the outside world, not people, not noise, but the storm inside his mind. Before this, every word someone said pulled him instantly. Every criticism felt like an attack. Every disrespect felt personal. Every delay felt like rejection. His emotions controlled his behavior like invisible strings. He thought reacting was strength, answering fast, defending himself, explaining, proving, correcting. But the day he chose silence instead of reaction, clarity entered his life for the first time. He realized something painful and powerful at the same time. Most reactions are not intelligence. They are reflexes. They come from fear, ego, and insecurity, not wisdom. When someone spoke harshly to him and he didn't respond immediately, he felt the urge rise in his chest like fire, but he didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He didn't defend. And in that stillness, His mind suddenly saw the situation clearly. He noticed the other person's insecurity. He noticed their emotional instability. He noticed their need for control. And most importantly, he noticed that none of it actually required his energy. For the first time, he was not inside the emotion, he was observing it. This was the moment he understood the hidden power of not reacting. It separates you from the chaos. When you react, you are inside the storm. When you don't, you see the storm from above. And when you see clearly, you gain control. He started noticing patterns everywhere. The angrier someone became, the calmer he felt. The louder they spoke, the quieter his mind became. The more they tried to provoke him, the more obvious their weakness looked. Silence was no longer awkward, it became strategic. It gave him time. Time to think. Time to choose. Time to act intentionally instead of emotionally. And people around him began to feel it. Conversations shifted. Arguments died before they began. Power dynamics changed without a single word being spoken. People expected him to react, to justify, to explain, but he didn't. And that uncertainty made them uncomfortable because people feel safe when they can predict you. When you stop reacting, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability, when combined with calmness, feels like authority. Inside his mind, another transformation was happening. His thoughts became sharper. His decisions became slower but more accurate. He no longer wasted mental energy replaying conversations, regretting words, or imagining better responses. Because he hadn't reacted, there was nothing to regret. There was no emotional damage to repair, no apology to prepare, no defense to justify. Silence protected his energy like a shield. And in that protected space, self-respect began to grow. He realized that reacting quickly was something he did when he felt small, when he needed validation, when he needed to be understood, when he needed to win. But now, he didn't need to win every moment. He didn't need to correct everyone. He didn't need to prove his worth. He understood a deep truth. The strongest people don't rush to respond, they choose when to respond. As days passed, he noticed how people tested him. Subtle comments, passive aggression, sarcasm, emotional bait. Before, these would hook him instantly. Now, he saw them as signals. Signals of insecurity. Signals of manipulation. Signals of unmet needs. And instead of reacting, he listened. Instead of defending, he observed. This shift gave him psychological dominance. Not because he controlled others, but because he controlled himself. Emotional control became his new strength. While others were controlled by their feelings, he was guided by awareness. While others spoke to release tension, he remained silent to preserve clarity. And that clarity changed how people treated him. They spoke more carefully. They explained themselves more. They hesitated before disrespect. Because silence forces reflection, both in yourself and in others. But this transformation wasn't easy. Silence felt uncomfortable at first. His heart raced. His ego screamed. His mind begged him to respond. There were moments when silence felt like weakness. Moments when he worried people would misunderstand him. Moments when he feared losing respect. But every time he held the silence, something powerful happened. The urge passed. And when the urge passed, he felt stronger than before. He realized urges are temporary, but reactions create permanent consequences. By not reacting, he trained his nervous system to stay calm under pressure. His body learned that it didn't need to panic. His mind learned that it didn't need to defend instantly. This training reshaped his identity. He was no longer reactive, he was intentional. He also began to see how much noise existed in the world. Opinions, judgments, provocations, drama, and how little of it actually mattered. Silence filtered out the unnecessary. It revealed what was real. It exposed who respected him and who needed control. It showed him which conversations were worth engaging in and which were emotional traps. And slowly, his life became simpler, lighter, more focused. He chose his battles carefully. He spoke less, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. People listened, not because he was loud, but because he was grounded. This is the paradox of not reacting. You lose nothing, but you gain everything. You gain clarity. You gain control. You gain self-respect. You gain emotional strength. You gain influence without effort. And the most powerful part? You gain peace. Not the fake peace that comes from avoidance, but the real peace that comes from mastery over yourself. He finally understood that silence is not the absence of power, it is the presence of it. And in a world addicted to noise, reactions, and emotional explosions, the calm, silent person stands out like a mountain. Unshaken, unmoved, unstoppable. By the end of this phase, he no longer saw silence as something passive. He saw it as a deliberate choice, a weapon, a boundary, a form of self-leadership. He didn't need to announce it. He didn't need to explain it. He simply lived it. And without realizing it, he had crossed an invisible line, from someone controlled by the world to someone who controlled his inner world. And that, more than any reaction, changed everything. When not reacting makes others reveal their true nature. There was a moment in his life when he finally understood something most people never see. It didn't come from winning an argument, proving a point, or saying the perfect sentence. It came from doing nothing, from staying silent, from not reacting when every part of his body wanted to explode. He was standing there, listening to someone criticize him unfairly, twisting his words, testing his limits. In the past, he would have jumped in immediately, defending, explaining, justifying. But this time, something inside him stayed still. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct. He didn't fight back. He simply watched. And that was when the truth revealed itself. The other person kept talking, and talking, and talking. Their voice got louder, then sharper, then desperate. They started contradicting themselves. Their confidence cracked. Their hidden emotions leaked out. In that silence, he saw them clearly for the first time. Not who they pretended to be, but who they really were. Most people don't realize this. When you react instantly, you give others control over the situation. You give them a mirror to hide behind. Your reaction becomes the focus, not their behavior. But when you don't react, there is no mirror. No distraction. No escape. People are forced to face themselves. Silence removes the mask. It exposes insecurity, ego, fear, and manipulation. And that's why silence makes people uncomfortable. Not because it's weak, but because it's honest. When there's no emotional response to feed on, people start revealing their true intentions without realizing it. He noticed a pattern. Calm people became calmer around him. Respectful people stayed respectful. But insecure people, they couldn't handle it. They filled the silence with unnecessary words. They over-explained. They attacked harder. They tried jokes. They tried dominance. They tried guilt. And every attempt revealed more about them than about him. He learned that not reacting isn't about being passive. It's about creating space where truth has nowhere to hide. There's a psychological law at play here. Humans are driven by feedback loops. When someone provokes, they expect resistance. When they insult, they expect pain. When they manipulate, they expect confusion. Take that feedback away, and their internal system starts malfunctioning. Their brain looks for confirmation that they matter, that they have power, that they're affecting you. When they don't get it, anxiety rises. And anxiety exposes character. He remembered how, before learning this, he thought strength meant winning every exchange. Now he understood strength meant choosing which exchanges were even worth entering. Silence became a filter. It separated noise from truth, ego from intention, confidence from performance. And the most powerful part? He didn't have to say a single word. There was another moment, a different setting, different people, but the same lesson. Someone tried to embarrass him publicly, throwing subtle insults disguised as jokes. Laughter followed. Old instincts screamed, "Respond now, defend yourself, reclaim respect." But he didn't. He smiled slightly. He said nothing. The room shifted. The joker kept going, pushing harder, trying to squeeze a reaction out of him. But each attempt felt more awkward than the last. Eventually, the laughter faded. People started noticing the desperation behind the jokes. The embarrassment didn't land on him. It bounced back to its source. Silence didn't protect him. It exposed the other person. That's when he realized something deeper. Reacting is often an unconscious agreement to play someone else's game. Not reacting is refusing the game entirely. And when you refuse, people reveal their rules, their weaknesses, their hunger for control. Silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough about your inner stability not to trade it for a moment of emotional release. This changed how he moved through the world. Conversations felt different. Conflicts felt slower. People treated him differently, not because he was louder or more aggressive, but because he was unpredictable in the most unsettling way. They couldn't read him easily. They couldn't push his buttons. And when people can't control your emotions, they either respect you or expose themselves trying. He learned that those who are comfortable with silence are usually comfortable with themselves. And those who fear silence often fear what it might reveal. Not reacting became a mirror, not for him but for everyone else. It showed him who was calm, who was reactive, who was honest, and who relied on emotional chaos to feel powerful. This wasn't about manipulation. It was about clarity. Silence stripped situations down to their core. Without emotional smoke, motives became visible. Words became unnecessary. Energy told the story. And once you see people clearly, you stop taking their behavior personally. You stop absorbing their moods. You stop reacting from habit and start responding from choice. By the end of that phase in his life, he no longer felt the urge to correct every misunderstanding or fight every injustice immediately. He understood timing. He understood restraint. He understood that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Not because you're weak, but because you're watching, learning, letting others show you exactly who they are. And once someone reveals their true nature, you never forget it. Paragraph 5. The hidden strength of delayed response. By the time people around him began to notice the change, Noah himself was still unsure what was happening inside him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. There was no sudden confidence, no explosive breakthrough moment. Instead, there was something quieter and far more dangerous in its power. Noah had learned to delay his response. And in that delay, he found a strength most people never touch. In the past, Noah reacted instantly. A comment, a look, a message, a tone. His emotions jumped forward before his mind could catch up. If someone disrespected him, his body reacted before his thoughts formed. His voice tightened. His chest heated. His words rushed out half-formed and full of emotion. He thought reacting fast meant he was strong, honest, real. But all it did was expose him. People could press a button and watch him move exactly how they wanted. What Noah didn't understand back then was this. Speed favors emotion, not intelligence. The faster you react, the less control you have. The shift began the day he didn't respond. It was a small moment, almost forgettable. Someone questioned his decision in front of others. The old Noah would have defended himself immediately, trying to explain, justify, prove. His mouth opened, then stopped. He felt the familiar rush rising, but instead of releasing it, he held it. He stayed silent, just for a few seconds. Not passive, not afraid, just still. Those seconds felt uncomfortable. His body wanted relief. His ego wanted expression. His mind screamed, say something, do something. But Noah stayed quiet, and something strange happened. The other person kept talking, then over-explaining, then correcting themselves. The energy shifted. The room leaned, not toward the loud voice, but toward the quiet one. Noah didn't win by speaking. He won by waiting. That was the moment he realized something life-changing. The delay is where power lives. Delayed response is not weakness. It is emotional discipline. It is the ability to feel everything and still choose nothing. Most people cannot tolerate the internal pressure of silence. They rush to react because reacting releases tension. Silence forces you to hold it. And whoever can hold tension the longest controls the situation. Noah began practicing this deliberately. When criticized, he paused. When provoked, he breathed. When misunderstood, he waited. When tempted to explain, he stayed still. First, it was painful. His mind created stories. His ego felt attacked. His body resisted. Silence felt like surrender. But slowly, he noticed something profound. Not every moment requires a response. And more importantly, not every response deserves to be immediate. People began to reveal themselves in the space Noah created. Some grew nervous. Some became aggressive. Some exposed insecurity. Some backed down. Why? Because when you delay your response, you force others to sit with their own energy. Most people speak to escape discomfort. Silence reflects their emotions back to them. It becomes a mirror, and many don't like what they see. Noah also noticed something else changing: his self-respect. Before, reacting made him feel temporarily powerful but permanently drained. Now, delaying made him feel grounded, centered, untouchable. He realized that every time he didn't react, he was telling himself, "I don't need to prove anything." That message reshaped his identity. The world trains us to believe speed equals intelligence. Quick replies, fast opinions, immediate defense. But wisdom moves slower. It watches. It absorbs. Calculates. Emotional maturity is not about what you say, it's about what you don't say. Delayed response gave Noah clarity. When he stopped reacting instantly, he could observe patterns. He could see who spoke from insecurity and who spoke from confidence. He could distinguish criticism from projection, noise from truth, emotion from intention. The delay gave him perspective, and perspective gave him control. This didn't mean Noah became silent all the time. He still spoke. But now, when he did, his words landed heavier. Because they were chosen, not forced. Calm, not reactive. Clear, not defensive. People started listening differently. Not because he talked more, but because he talked less. In conversations, Noah noticed the shift. He no longer filled silence. He let others speak first. He let pauses exist. And in those pauses, people revealed priorities, fears, motives. Silence became a tool, not an absence. Delayed response also protected Noah from regret. Before, words spoken in emotion followed him like shadows. He replayed them, wished he could take them back. Now, by waiting, he filtered emotion before expression. The delay acted like a gate. Only thoughts strong enough to survive calm passed through. And here's the paradox. The longer Noah waited, the faster his life moved forward. Because he wasted less energy fixing emotional damage. Because he stopped fighting unnecessary battles. Because he conserved attention for what mattered. People often think power comes from domination, aggression, volume. But the most powerful people operate from internal stillness. They don't rush. They don't chase. They don't react. They respond. And response is always slower than reaction. Noah learned that delayed response is not about ignoring others. It's about respecting yourself. It's choosing alignment over impulse, purpose over ego, long-term impact over short-term relief. In a world addicted to instant reactions, the person who pauses becomes rare, and rarity creates influence. By mastering the delay, Noah didn't just control conversations. He controlled his inner world. And once you control that, nothing outside can truly shake you. This was not the end of his transformation, but it was a foundation. Because from this point forward, Noah was no longer living at the mercy of triggers. He had learned to wait. And waiting, he discovered, was not empty time. It was power gathering itself. Paragraph 6. The moment you stop explaining yourself. There came a moment in Noah's life when something inside him quietly broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a calm, irreversible way that felt like a door closing forever. It happened during a conversation that should have been ordinary. Someone questioned his decision, his pace, his silence, his future. Before, Noah would have rushed to explain. He would have justified every step, defended every pause, softened his tone so others would feel comfortable. But this time, something was different. He felt the familiar urge rise in his chest. The heat, the pressure, the need to be understood. But instead of acting on it, he paused. He breathed. And he said nothing. The silence stretched. The other person shifted. Uncomfortable, confused, almost offended. Noah realized something profound in that space. The need to explain was not about clarity, it was about fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged. Fear of losing approval. And the moment he stopped explaining himself, that fear lost its grip. He saw clearly for the first time that confident people do not rush to make sense to everyone. They let others sit with uncertainty. They let silence do the work. From that day forward, Noah began to notice how often people explain not because it is necessary, but because they are seeking permission to exist as they are. Every explanation was a small surrender of power. Every unnecessary justification handed control to someone else. And by choosing silence, Noah was quietly reclaiming himself. As the days passed, this shift deepened. When criticized unfairly, he no longer jumped to defend his character. When misunderstood, he did not chase clarity at the cost of peace. When provoked, he did not rush to prove intelligence or correctness. Instead, he observed. He listened. He let people reveal their intentions through their impatience. What shocked him most was how often people exposed their insecurity the moment he refused to react. Some became aggressive. Some became sarcastic. Some tried harder to provoke a response. And in every case, Noah learned the same lesson. The one who needs a reaction is the one who has already lost control. Silence became his filter. Those who respected it stayed. Those who couldn't handle it drifted away. He stopped wasting energy explaining himself to people who were committed to misunderstanding him. He realized that explanation only works when the listener is open, and many people are not. They listen only to respond, to judge, to compare. Silence, on the other hand, reveals everything. It shows who respects boundaries, who seeks control, who thrives on drama. And the more Noah practiced this restraint, the more his presence changed. He spoke less, but when he did, his words carried weight. He reacted slower, but his decisions were sharper. People began to listen more carefully, not because he demanded attention, but because he no longer chased it. This was not passivity. This was discipline. Not reacting did not mean suppressing emotion, it meant mastering it. Inside, Noah still felt anger, frustration, doubt. But he no longer allowed those emotions to control his behavior. He learned that emotions are information, not instructions. Just because you feel something does not mean you must act on it. This single understanding rewired how he moved through the world. He became harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, harder to shake. People who once dismissed him now hesitated before speaking. Not because he was louder, but because he was grounded. There is a quiet authority in someone who does not explain themselves unnecessarily. It signals self-trust. It says, I do not need your approval to stand where I stand. And that signal is powerful. Noah noticed that arguments ended faster. Conflicts dissolved before they started. The absence of reaction removed the fuel others depended on. Drama needs participation. Ego needs opposition. When Noah stopped feeding them, they starved. The most difficult part was the loneliness that came with this change. Silence can feel isolating at first. When you stop explaining, some people assume distance. When you stop reacting, some assume arrogance. Noah had to accept this cost. Growth always demands separation, from old patterns, old identities, old expectations. He learned to sit comfortably with being misunderstood. Not because it felt good, but because it felt honest. He was no longer performing clarity for others. He was no longer translating himself to fit smaller minds. He chose peace over approval, control over chaos. And slowly, something unexpected happened. The right people began to understand him without explanation. They read between his silences. They respected his pauses. They listened when he spoke. Because when you stop over-explaining, you make space for genuine connection instead of forced validation. By the time Noah fully embraced this principle, he realized it wasn't just changing his interactions, it was reshaping his identity. He no longer saw himself as someone who needed to be understood by everyone. He saw himself as someone responsible only for his actions, not others' interpretations. That distinction freed him. It sharpened his focus. It strengthened his boundaries. Not reacting became his quiet rebellion against a world addicted to noise. And in that rebellion, he found power, not the loud, fragile kind, but the calm, unshakable kind that does not beg to be seen. Paragraph 7. The moment you stop reacting, you start controlling reality. There comes a moment in every person's journey where silence stops feeling like weakness and starts feeling like power. For Leon, that moment didn't arrive with fireworks or applause. It arrived quietly, almost invisibly, on an ordinary day when something inside him finally changed. Before, not reacting felt like swallowing fire. Every insult burned in his chest. Every unfair word begged for an answer. Every disrespect felt like a challenge he had to meet immediately. Reacting had been automatic, like breathing. Someone pushed, he pushed back. Someone spoke loudly, he spoke louder. Someone tried to dominate, he tried harder. And every time, he walked away exhausted, drained, and secretly ashamed that he had once again given his power away. But on this day, Leon noticed something different. When the familiar tension rose inside him, he didn't rush to kill it with words. He didn't rush to defend himself. He didn't rush to prove anything. He simply noticed it, the tightness in his chest, the heat in his face, the storm forming in his thoughts. And instead of reacting, he paused. That pause, only a few seconds long, felt longer than anything he had ever experienced. In that silence, he realized something shocking. The urge to react was not him. It was a reflex, a habit, a program installed by years of fear, insecurity, and emotional conditioning. And for the first time, he chose not to obey it. What happened next felt unreal. The situation didn't collapse. The world didn't end. The other person didn't win. In fact, the opposite happened. The energy shifted. The person in front of him grew uneasy. They expected resistance. They expected emotion. They expected noise. Instead, they got stillness. Leon's calm wasn't passive. It wasn't empty. It was heavy. It filled the space like pressure before a storm. And in that moment, Leon understood a truth most people never see. Whoever reacts first loses control of the frame. Control doesn't come from domination. It comes from stability. The person who can remain unmoved controls the emotional temperature of the room. The one who reacts hands that control away. Leon began to see reactions for what they really were, leaks of power. Every angry response, every defensive explanation, every emotional outburst was a signal saying, "You affect me." Silence, on the other hand, said nothing, and that was the point. Silence didn't explain. It didn't justify. It didn't chase understanding. It simply existed. And that existence forced others to confront themselves. As Leon practiced this non-reaction, something deeper began to change. His mind grew quieter. Not empty, clear. He noticed how much of his past stress had come not from events themselves, but from the endless mental noise afterward. Replaying conversations, imagining better responses, wishing he had said something different. But now, without reacting, there was nothing to replay. No emotional residue, no regret, just presence, just clarity. He wasn't suppressing emotions. He was transcending them. People around him noticed the shift before he did. Conversations changed. Conflicts shortened. Some people respected him more without knowing why. Others grew frustrated, even angry, because their usual tactics stopped working. Provocation failed. Manipulation failed. Emotional hooks found nothing to latch onto. Leon wasn't cold. He wasn't distant. He was grounded. And grounded people are dangerous in a world addicted to chaos. There is a secret truth here that most never learn. Reacting feels powerful, but it's addictive weakness. It gives the illusion of strength while quietly reinforcing dependence on external triggers. Not reacting feels uncomfortable at first because it breaks that addiction. It removes the familiar rush of expression. It leaves you alone with yourself. And that's where growth begins. Leon learned to sit inside discomfort without needing to escape it through words or actions. And in that space, he found something rare: self-trust. With time, Leon discovered that not reacting didn't mean never speaking. It meant choosing when to speak. When he did speak, his words carried weight. They weren't emotional noise. They were deliberate, calm, precise. People listened because they could feel the restraint behind the words. Silence had sharpened his voice. This shift also transformed how Leon learned and communicated in English. Before, he rushed to respond, afraid of silence, afraid of mistakes. Now he allowed pauses. He allowed thinking. He allowed imperfection without panic. And paradoxically, his fluency improved. His memory improved. His confidence deepened. Because confidence doesn't come from speed, it comes from control. The same discipline that taught him not to react emotionally taught him to speak intentionally. He stopped filling space with fear and started filling it with meaning. The greatest revelation came when Leon realized that not reacting wasn't about others at all. It was about reclaiming ownership of his inner world. When you don't react, you choose your response. When you choose your response, you choose your identity. You stop being a collection of impulses and start becoming a conscious force. Life stops happening to you and starts moving with you. In that stillness, Leon felt something he had never felt before. Not excitement, not victory, but authority. Quiet authority. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that doesn't argue. The kind that simply stands. And once you taste that, you can never go back. Because reacting is noisy, but control is silent. And silence, when mastered, bends reality without ever raising its voice. Paragraph 8. When you stop reacting, people start respecting you. Something strange began to happen the moment Noah truly stopped reacting. Not pretending, not forcing silence, but genuinely choosing stillness over impulse. First, nobody noticed. The world rarely notices internal changes right away. People still interrupted him. They still tested him with careless words, subtle disrespect, and quiet provocations meant to trigger a response. But Noah had changed on the inside, and that changed the timing of his reactions. He no longer rushed to explain himself. He no longer defended every misunderstood intention. He no longer corrected people immediately just to feel heard. And that delay, those few seconds of calm silence, created something powerful. Space. In that space, people started to feel exposed. They expected emotion. They expected resistance. They expected noise. Instead, they got composure. At first, the silence confused them. When someone made a sarcastic comment, they waited for Noah's reaction. When someone dismissed his idea, they expected a quick comeback. When someone challenged him unfairly, they anticipated tension. But Noah simply looked at them, calm, present, unmoved. That calm was unsettling. Humans are deeply uncomfortable when their emotional bait goes unanswered. Silence forces people to confront their own behavior. Without resistance, there's nothing to push against, so their words echo back to them. Noah noticed something important. People reveal more when you don't interrupt them with your emotions. They talk more. They explain themselves unnecessarily. They expose insecurity, arrogance, or confusion. And the more Noah stayed still, the more control he gained, not by force but by restraint. Over time, something shifted. The same people who once spoke over him began to pause before speaking. The same voices that once challenged him casually now chose their words more carefully. Respect didn't arrive as praise or compliments. It arrived quietly, in the form of hesitation. People started checking his reactions before continuing. They began asking for his opinion instead of assuming it. Noah realized that respect is rarely demanded, it's felt. And what people felt from him now was emotional stability. He wasn't easy to provoke. He wasn't predictable. He wasn't needy for validation. That alone placed him in a different psychological category. Humans instinctively respect those who seem self-contained, those whose emotions are not easily accessed or manipulated. There was a moment that confirmed this transformation. During a tense discussion, someone tried to undermine Noah publicly. In the past, this would have triggered a fast, defensive response. But this time, Noah didn't react. He listened. He allowed the words to land without flinching. Then he waited. The room grew quiet, awkward, heavy. The person who tried to dominate the moment suddenly began explaining themselves, filling the silence with justifications. By the time Noah spoke, slowly, calmly, with only a few words, the power dynamic had already shifted. He didn't need to win the argument. The room had already decided who was grounded and who was unstable. That was the moment Noah understood a deep truth. Emotional control doesn't just protect you, it elevates you. As days passed, Noah saw how not reacting changed his communication completely. His words carried more weight because he used fewer of them. His silence made people listen when he finally spoke. He wasn't louder. He wasn't aggressive. He was precise. And precision commands respect. People began associating his presence with clarity and calm. They trusted him more, not because he agreed with everyone, but because he didn't react emotionally under pressure. In a world full of impulsive reactions, the person who stays composed becomes a reference point. Others subconsciously look to them for stability. Noah became that person not by trying to lead, but by refusing to lose control. This shift affected every area of his life. In conversations, people stopped pushing his boundaries because they didn't know how far they could go. At work, his opinions were taken seriously because he didn't waste energy on emotional displays. In personal relationships, conflicts de-escalated faster because he didn't fuel them with reactions. And most importantly, inside his own mind, there was peace. Noah no longer replayed conversations obsessively. He no longer regretted emotional outbursts. He slept better, thought clearer, and spoke with intention. Not reacting didn't make him weak, it made him unshakable. The greatest lesson Noah learned was this: respect isn't about dominance through force, volume, or intelligence. It's about self-mastery. When people see that you control yourself, they assume you can control situations. When they realize they can't easily affect your emotional state, they naturally adjust their behavior around you. This isn't manipulation. It's psychology. Humans respect what they cannot easily influence. And emotional restraint signals depth, confidence, and inner authority. By the time Noah fully embraced this way of being, he no longer needed approval. Respect followed him naturally. Conversations slowed down around him. People listened. People paused. People reconsidered their words. All because he learned one powerful skill most never master: the ability to stay calm when reacting would be easier. And in that calm, he didn't just gain respect from others, he gained respect for himself. Paragraph 9, when silence turns into inner power. By the time Noah reached this stage, something inside him had fundamentally changed. Not on the surface, he still looked like the same person, walked the same streets, worked the same job, but internally the noise had faded. The constant urge to explain himself, defend his choices, or react instantly to every comment had slowly dissolved. Silence was no longer something he used as a tactic. It had become a natural state. And this was the moment when silence stopped being restraint and started becoming inner power. Before, Noah's mind was crowded. Every interaction left echoes, words replaying, imagined arguments continuing long after the moment had passed. Someone's criticism could ruin his entire day. A small disrespect could live rent-free in his head for weeks. His energy leaked through reactions. But now, when people spoke carelessly or tried to provoke him, there was space between the stimulus and his response. In that space, Noah felt something unfamiliar: choice. He was no longer controlled by impulse. He was no longer predictable. And that unpredictability made him powerful. He noticed how people began to behave differently around him. Some became cautious, choosing their words more carefully. Others grew uneasy, filling the silence with nervous explanations. A few tried harder to provoke him, uncomfortable with the fact that they could no longer pull emotional strings. Noah understood then. Many people rely on reactions to feel important. When you stop reacting, you remove their sense of control. And when control disappears, truth reveals itself. Silence gave Noah clarity. Instead of reacting, he started observing. He noticed patterns: who spoke to understand and who spoke to dominate, who used words to connect and who used them to manipulate. He saw how often people projected their insecurities outward, disguised as jokes, criticism, or honest opinions. When Noah no longer reacted, those projections had nowhere to land. They fell back onto the speaker. And that was uncomfortable for them, not for him. This inner power was not loud. It didn't announce itself. It didn't need validation. It was calm, steady, grounded. Noah realized that reacting had always been a form of begging to be understood, to be respected, to be seen. Silence, on the other hand, assumed those things without asking. It communicated self-worth without words. It said, "I don't need to prove myself to you." There were moments when silence was misunderstood as weakness. At first, some people thought Noah was passive, that he had nothing to say, that he was easy to step over. But time corrected that misunderstanding. They soon realized he was not silent because he was afraid. He was silent because he was selective. And selectiveness is not weakness, it is discipline. The same discipline that separates reaction from intention, impulse from control. Noah learned that inner power grows when you stop feeding every emotion that arises. Feelings still came. Anger, frustration, disappointment, but he didn't hand them the microphone. He let them pass through without letting them take over. This was not suppression. It was mastery. He was no longer at war with his emotions. He simply refused to be ruled by them. The greatest shift happened in how Noah spoke when he did choose to speak. His words carried more weight now. Because he spoke less, people listened more. Because he reacted less, his responses felt deliberate, grounded, final. Silence sharpened his voice. It stripped away unnecessary explanations and left only what mattered. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't to defend himself, it was to define his boundaries. Internally, Noah felt lighter. The exhaustion he once carried, the emotional hangover from every interaction, was gone. Silence conserved energy, protected focus, created space for growth. Instead of replaying arguments in his head, he used that mental energy to learn, to reflect, to improve. Silence didn't make him smaller. It gave him room to expand. He also learned an uncomfortable truth. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts or emotions. Some people don't want understanding, they want reaction. And when you give them silence instead, you deny them their reward. That denial is not cruelty. It's self-respect. Noah stopped trying to be emotionally available to everyone. Availability, he realized, is a privilege, not an obligation. This inner power changed how Noah approached challenges, too. When problems arose, he didn't panic outwardly. He paused. He assessed. He responded with strategy instead of emotion. Silence gave him time, and time gave him leverage. While others reacted quickly and regretfully, Noah moved slowly and precisely. And precision, he learned, always outperforms speed driven by emotion. By now, silence had become more than a response. It was a foundation, a way of being. Noah understood that not reacting was not about winning against others. It was about winning against the old version of himself, the version that needed approval, validation, and constant emotional release. Silence marked the distance between who he was and who he had become. And in that quiet space, Noah felt something rare and profound. Self-trust. He trusted his judgment. He trusted his timing. He trusted that he didn't need to explain everything to everyone. Silence gave him that trust. And with it came an unshakable calm. A calm that no insult could steal, no provocation could disturb. This was not the end of the journey, but it was a turning point. Because once silence becomes inner power, you stop reacting to the world and start shaping how the world reacts to you. Paragraph 10, the quiet power that changes everything. By the time he reached this point in his life, the change was undeniable. Not because the world applauded him, but because the world responded differently to him. The same people who once tried to provoke him now hesitated. The same situations that once stole his peace now passed quietly, unable to disturb his center. He had learned the final truth of not reacting. It was never about silence for silence's sake, and it was never about suppressing emotions. It was about choosing power over impulse. He realized that most people live as prisoners of reaction, reacting to words, reacting to opinions, reacting to disrespect, reacting to fear, while believing they are in control. But the moment he stopped reacting automatically, he stepped out of that prison. He no longer gave his energy to every comment, every insult, every challenge. He understood that attention is currency, and reaction is payment. When you react, you pay. When you don't, you keep your power. This awareness changed the way he spoke, the way he listened, the way he walked into rooms. His silence was no longer emptiness. It was presence. His calm was no longer weakness, it was authority. He noticed something subtle yet profound. People began to explain themselves around him. When he didn't argue, others defended their arguments. When he didn't get angry, others grew uncomfortable. When he didn't rush to respond, others revealed their insecurity. He didn't need to dominate conversations anymore. His restraint did it for him. He had reached the highest level of emotional strength, inner stability. And from that stability came clarity, respect, and influence. Not because he demanded them, but because people naturally gravitate toward those who are not shaken by chaos. He finally understood that reacting quickly may feel powerful in the moment, but it makes you predictable. Not reacting makes you unreadable, and unreadable people are hard to control. This was the final lesson of the journey. Life will always try to pull you into emotional storms. People will test you. Situations will pressure you. Words will attempt to hook you. But you now know the secret most never learn, that you always have a choice. You don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to prove yourself. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to correct everyone. You don't have to explain your growth. Silence, when chosen consciously, is not avoidance, it is mastery. It allows you to observe instead of explode, to decide instead of react, to lead instead of follow. And once you experience this level of control, you can never unsee it. You begin to move differently through life. Slower, calmer, stronger, unshaken. If you've reached this point in the story, understand this clearly. This is not just a story you listen to, this is a mindset you can live by. The power of not reacting is not about becoming cold or distant. It is about becoming intentional. It is about protecting your energy, sharpening your focus, and choosing your battles wisely. It is about emotional intelligence, mental discipline, and inner leadership. And the more you practice it, the more you'll notice your confidence grow, your stress decrease, and your presence become undeniable. Now the question is not what did you learn, but what will you do next? If this story helped you see yourself differently, if it gave you clarity where there was confusion, if it made you feel stronger without shouting, then don't stop here. Subscribe for more mindset stories that reshape how you think, speak, and live. Like this video so this message reaches someone who needs it today. Comment below, I choose calm over chaos. And commit to this mindset publicly. Because the world is loud. Reactions are cheap. But calm, controlled silence? That is rare. And rare things are powerful. Master your emotions. Control your reactions. And you will control your life.